We are ready to review and learn some new rules this week. So before we learn those new ones, let's go ahead and review what you see in front of you. So last time in lesson 12, now we're ready to learn into lesson 13, but in lesson 12, we learned about the A sound at the end of words, the E sound at the end of words, and the I sound at the end of words. And so we said these things are called vowel teams that help us make these sounds at the ends of words. And so as you're looking at the screen, remember a Y is a vowel team that says A at the end of a word, and EE is a vowel team that says E at the end of a word. And then remember, we said if we want to make the I sound at the end of a word, then we use the letter Y. Remember that no English words end with the letter I. So if we hear that I sound, we're always going to use the letter Y for it. All right, so today we're going to talk about the long O sound at the end of words. And so, what letters do we use to spell the O sound when we hear it? So, I want you to look at the word that I've made, and we're going to go ahead and divide it into its syllables. So, remember, start with the vowels and push them over apart from each other. So, I'm going to take this one over here, and then I've got the A in the middle. Remember that anything in between usually goes towards the end. All right, so this is the way it would look if I took and divided it into its syllables. So let's look at what that word would be. And it should be tomato. All right, what kind of syllable is this last syllable? Is it open, closed, or a vowel team? It's open, right, because there's nothing to close in that vowel. Sometimes the long O sound at the end of a word is spelled with just an open O, an open syllable that has an O at the end. So you can have English words that just end in the letter O and say their sound, long sound, O. All right, let's take another example. There is another way to spell the O sound at the end of words. Let's divide this one into its syllables. All right, so it's got that vowel, makes that push over that way. And then look, I have OW on a red tile. So two letters on a one tile are going to make one sound. So actually, this is a vowel team, even though W isn't a vowel. It's a vowel team because it says the O sound. And then the L goes this direction. So now let's look at this word. We have the word hello. Right. What kind of syllable is the last one now? Is it open, closed, or a vowel team? Right. OW at the end of the word usually says O, and it's most common way of spelling O at the end of a word. So this is the most common way. So in most words, when you hear the O sound at the end, it will be spelled with this vowel team, O-W. Okay, let's look at another example. Look at this word. I have two red tiles, two vowels. I'm going to separate it into its syllables. So that means I'm going to take the first vowel, I, and I'm going to push it over to the side. And what's in front of it will go with it. Whoops, the board is not being very happy right now. All right, so there's that one. And then I have the OW, which is going to be my other vowel. It's going to go that way. Now I have LL. What do I do with those two letters in the middle? Do you remember? Remember when they're double, one goes one way and one goes the other way. Good. So now I can see this first syllable is closed. So it's going to say pill. And then the second syllable is a vowel team. Not open, but a vowel team. So this vowel team is going to say O, so low, Pillow. Remember when we have two letters that are exactly the same together, we don't have to say pill low. We can just run their sounds together as one. So pillow. So pillow, OW at the end makes the O sound. And remember, this is the most common way to spell the OW sound at the end of words, or the O sound is with the OW. It's the most common one. Here's one more. Look at this one. Think about how we would divide it. Let's divide it into its syllables. You be thinking which letters go where. This is what it would look like. Open or closed syllable? Closed. So it's going to say L, and then a vowel team syllable. O, bow. So this word is good. So remember, the most common way to spell O at the end of any word is OW. So if you're spelling a word that ends with the sound O, you're going to try OW first before any other way. Okay? So if you're not sure whether the last sound is just an O or if it's an OW, guess what we can use? We can use our spell checker. So I want you to get your spell checker out. We're going to use it today, and we're going to try it out on a couple of words. Okay? So get your spell checker. The first word we're going to put into the spell checker is veto. And I want you to put VETOW into your spell checker. If you need more time, go get it, pause the video, come back. All right. So because veto, there's no rule that tells me if veto ends in an O or an OW. I do know that OW is the most common way, so I'm going to start with OW. So when I put VETOW into my spell checker, all right, what do we see? We go ahead, we enter it. Remember how we do this? And then we see that it gives us suggestions for how to spell it. All right. If you see the arrow on the side, remember it's going to ask you if you meant to spell a different word other than veto. And so we're going to choose the very first one. And how do we spell veto? It is not with the OW, but it's with just the O. So the spell checker helps us to know that one. Here's the second one. Try this one. Enter TOW. That word would be toe. So let's enter TOW. How is the sound O spelled in that word? When you put it into your spell checker, it says OW. It is correct. It doesn't give us a different one for spelling. But if you look, you'll see a flashing question mark, because this one doesn't have corrected spelling suggestions, but it has a question mark there. And that means, oh, wait a minute, there are different ways to spell this word. And TOW is correct for one way to spell it. So if you click that question mark on your spell checker, so remember where the question mark is? And when you do it, by the way, it should say to pull, but push the question mark and it says two confusables. So this could be confused with TOW, which means to pull. And that's what you should see on the screen of your spell checker. It should say TOW, pull. And then when I look over to the side, there's a down arrow. And the down arrow says that you could also have TOE, which is foot, on your foot. So there are two different ways. So these are called confusables because there are different ways depending on what you mean. So it could be TOW if you mean to pull, Or it could be T and then OE if you mean the things at the end of your foot. So on your spell checker, this will be called a confusable. So if you see a question mark and not just an arrow, but you also see a question mark, it might be telling you that there are two different ways to spell this word. And it depends on how you're going to use the word. So this is a great way to be able to use your spell checker to figure out if you're spelling the correct version of the word. So do you mean to pull something like a tow truck? Or do you mean toe as in I hit my toe on the wall? So those are called confusables. All right. So that's what the question mark means. If you see the question mark flashing next to the word that you type in, then you can click the question mark at the bottom and it will show you what the confusables are. Okay. So it gives you a little definition so you know which one you mean to use. All right. By the way, how is the O sound spelled in the word that means the thing at the bottom of your foot? OE. That's right. So OE is actually another vowel team. And so OE isn't used very often, but it is another vowel team that comes at the end of words when you hear the O sound. But there are only maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 words that end in OE. So remember, the most common way to spell O, the sound at the end of a word, is OW. But there are these little words that use OE, okay? And we just did one of them. We said toe. Toe was one that used OE when you mean the things at the end of your foot. We can also use the word, these other letters in front of OE, this vowel team, OE. Woe. Woe means like sad. Okay. The Bible's old King James Version would say, woe is he. That would mean like he is very sad. Okay. So we can use woe. And then we can use these other ones. So let's see. We have J. If I put the J in front of it, what would it be? If I put the J in front of it, it would make it Joe, like somebody's name. Okay. All right. And then let's see. Let's choose another one. What if I put the F in front of it? Foe, like an enemy. And I could put a D in front of it. Doe, as in deer. So usually the only time I'm going to see this vowel team of OE at the end of a word is if it's one of these little tiny words. So not very often. So you can see there's like 5 of them right there. There might be a couple more that we could use, but there's not that many in our language that end with OE. There just aren't that many words. And the ones that do end in OE have only one syllable. So, if, first of all, if you have more than one syllable in the word, like pillow, oh, it's not going to have OE because there's too many syllables in it. So, and the most likely way to end it is OW. So you'll always start with that. All right, so we learned that there is a vowel team OE that says O at the end of words, but just a few very small words. We learned that there's a vowel team that says OW, spelled OW, says O at the end of words, and it's the most common way. We have learned that some words just end in the letter O at the end. But remember, the most common way is OW. So that's our lesson today, is the long sound of O, the O sound at the end of words, and different ways to spell it. So this is a spelling and a reading rule, remembering that if you see OE, it says O. If you see OW at the end of a word, it says O. Okay? It's also a spelling rule because if you're trying to spell a word, you know that it ends in the O sound. More than likely, it's going to be spelled OW. If it's a little tiny word, it might be OE, and it could be O in some words. But if we're not exactly sure if it's OW or just O, we can use a spell checker and check, usually starting with the OW since it's the most common. All right, that's it for today. You have finished the lesson and you can put your things away.